My name is Danielle Kristmanson. I'm a partner and creative director at Origin, and I'm joined with my friend and my client, David Norden. He's the CEO at Taos, Ski Valley. Again, in case you didn't just see what we were had pre-recorded. The goal of this session is really just to let everyone ask questions. I think there's probably a lot. We stretched the time that they gave us on that recording, so we're really happy to dig in and take a deeper dive into questions that you might have. David's got lots of great experience. We want to start just by honoring Sea Change's request to have a bit of a marketing and branding focused session. And what I'd love to do is open up those kind of questions, because the original intent was for us to talk about the branding of a B Corp and both the interesting opportunities and challenges that represented for David in his sort of journey. But we also realize there's a ton of people on here. It's really great to see there's lots of students and people that are clearly interested in things other than marketing. So as soon as we've cleared a few of those marketing questions, I'll open it up to anything else. If you have questions for David, really just in terms of his experience in becoming a part of the B Corp community, in operationally what he's had to go through at Taos Ski Valley, then we're really happy to talk about that if we can just give the marketing opportunity a little chance first. So Sarah is our trail guide, I found out. Thanks, Sarah, for posting these things. You can see Sarah's instructions in the chat if you are if you have the chat window open. If you're under session, there's event and session at the top. But if you're in the session and you click on the chat button, you'll see Sarah's instructions for how to interact with us during the session. You can post your questions and I'll keep tabs on them in the chat, or you can join us by Sarah's little instruction, just share audio and video. That's going to pop you up and it will let me know that you're there and wanting to join us on screen for a chat. We can bring 4 people in addition to David and I on, and we're happy to take questions like that. But we'll ask you to address your question, have a hello, and then maybe leave the chat just to give an opportunity for other people to come in. So we'll get started. William has been patiently waiting to hear from us, and I'll just bring William on and we can start with him.
Hi.
Hi, William. You got a question for us?
I do have a question. Great presentation, really fascinating. Makes me want to go. I haven't been to Taos since I was 18. The question is, and you just mentioned it briefly, I'm involved in a startup and starting with the mission of being a B Corp. So some of your customers, you said, I want to be careful not to offend anybody, but you mentioned Texas, so you had to work a fine line, and I wonder if you just mentioned it, and I wonder if you could say a little bit more about appealing to people who are passionate about things like B Corp and those who could be actually turned off by things like that.
That's a really good question. Something David and I talked a lot about. I'll let David speak to it.
Yeah, it's a great question. And when we first decided to become a B Corp, it was one of the questions that came up internally for our organization. And there's probably a feeling that the B Corp agenda is a little bit of a progressive agenda. And Texas is our largest market, and Texas is recognized as a state of conservatives. Oklahoma is a big market of ours, similar situation. So we were concerned for sure that we were going to alienate some of our customer base. And that's why we sort of eased into it. And that's why the Ski the Change campaign was the campaign that we selected, thinking that if I'm in Texas, the change may be the improvements. And if I'm in Denver, the change may be on environmental and social initiatives. So we eased into it. As we gained confidence and as we started to hear back from our customer base, we realized that the message was sound, the mission was good, And I think what we realized is people that understand what a B Corp is really jumped on the bandwagon, and those that didn't said, "It's all right. I'm going to go for the skiing. It's still a great mountain. It's still close to my hometown, and I may not be totally on board with these initiatives, but I'm still going to support it." I believe we may have alienated a few customers, but I think for every one or two that we've lost, we've probably picked up a multitude of those because of the strong ethos that's in place. So we are much more bold in what we're doing now and what we're saying and how we proceed with things. And, I think on the environmental front, most people that are in the outdoors, it's interesting. They get into the outdoors, they fall in love with nature, and they say, okay, we have to protect this. So I think we're on solid ground there. On the social initiatives front, I think it's a world that is new to many. How are we going to deal with these diversity, inclusion, and equity issues? And even internally, I think we've got a lot of work to do internally on that front. But to specifically answer your question, was there a concern of alienation, and is there still an aspect of that? I think there is, but I believe that the pickup is much greater than the loss. And I would encourage you to do everything. I think you're on the right track. I'm going to encourage you to proceed with that. I think the B Corp movement is a fantastic movement, and including working with so many great partners that help you build your business as well.
Great.
Thanks for the question, William. It was great. I can tell you that as someone who does a lot of branding, the benefit of branding is differentiation. And if you're not really taking advantage of every differentiating opportunity you have, you're not taking advantage of the power of your brand. And it's really counterintuitive in a startup where you're really trying to grow your customer base. The first place we go is how can we get it out to as many people as possible? How can we bring as many consumers in? Even if the values that they share aren't exactly ours, you're in startup mode, and casting your net really wide is really what most entrepreneurs want to do. And it's really counterintuitive. And David said it, for every one you turn off because your values don't align, you're really going to differentiate yourself in a world that is pretty crowded and cluttered to probably take more of your share of the market through your differentiation. Great. I'm going to, if it's okay with you, I'm going to invite Madison in. I will get to everyone, and I'm looking at the chat, and there's some questions for sure that are sort of aligning with this, but Madison is joining us, I think. And yeah, if you got a question, Madison, go ahead.
Sure. Hi. Thank you for this. I think that it's a really important conversation, and I loved your question, William, because I know that that's something that is a fear. My question is around, I loved what you said, David, about, you started to put that idea and agenda out there, and the response was great. And I think that as you look at brands that are making their way to B Corp, or they don't have all the requirements and things set in place, but they're still taking steps, they're still, their agenda is the same, but maybe they haven't checked all the boxes. Having that B Corp logo behind you makes it a little bit more of a safe space to start opening up and pulling back the curtain on all these efforts. What advice would you give to brands that don't yet have the B to support them and prove that they're doing these things? I think a lot of brands are waiting. So what would you say in terms of starting that messaging? What's a safe space or a safe lane if you're nervous about that first step, especially not having the credentials of a B Corp yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we became a B Corp, we immediately took that B and stuck it on as many things as we could. It's on some of our uniforms, and a lot of people don't know what it is, and it was. So, what is a B Corp? And they would dig in, and as soon as they did their homework, they're like, "Oh, that's fantastic! That's exactly what we get excited about." So, I do think there is value in the B Corp logo.
Sure.
You're asking, how do I get value out of this ethos without having that brand there? I think first it helps you develop your purpose, and you can start to build consensus internally. And I think getting your staff to really understand, and it took us a while. Even I think some of our staff were even a little skeptical at first. So yeah, this is just a marketing thing, right? You guys are just doing this so you can get out there. And it took a while for the staff to really embrace what we were doing. So I think part one to this is, if this is a direction that you're going, to ensure your staff that you are making the moves. I think I would definitely identify specific things that you do that demonstrate your commitment. And then the second thing is, in the public eye, I don't know what line of business you're in, but let's say you're in the retail business, to create those stories. And this is marketing. And is there a poster in that retail space that talks about, did you know, we're doing this or that, or we're purchasing this, or this is what our supply chain looks like, or those short little clips of videos that might tell a story. I think marketing and storytelling go hand in hand. But if you can start to identify those stories, I love the story of our collaboration with the Nature Conservancy and the sustainable forestry work that we do. The West is on fire. Everybody knows that when they hear about this. And if you could put the story together, so even without the B Corp logo or designation, if your commitment is there, I would try to identify some stories, and you might start with 2 or 3 stories, and it'll build over time. We actually got to a point where the list became so long, people, they fumbled because they couldn't keep up. So we had something internally that we said, what is your story? And if you work at our hotel and a guest steps into the lobby and says, hey, I heard about this B Corp thing, what is that? For that staff member to be equipped with their story. They may want to talk about the geothermal heating and cooling. They may want to talk about the fact that we have no plastic bottles anywhere on campus. But we really tried to put it to the staff to come up with their story. They only needed one, their little story.
Sure.
This is what a B Corp means. So I think starting to develop those things that you're committed to, start with a couple of stories, and I think it'll build from there.
I think there was something else that David and his team did early on that really sort of, made them feel more comfortable about talking about their initiatives, but B, brought the pressure down around I was going to ask this question if we didn't have questions, but we have loads of questions here. But also this fear of critique, like, you're
right.
You're now a B Corp. Like, what are you doing about blah, blah, blah? And we really worried about that. We really worried about, when we were positioning ourselves so soundly, what were we opening ourselves up to? And we decided really early on that we would position Taos as really a learner, that we're on a journey and we're doing our best and we're learning every day. And, those things that we learn, we're bringing back into our practice and our operation. And I think that really started to reduce, it allowed us to tell stories without fear of trolls and retribution and all that sort of stuff. It was just like, we're trying our best and we're doing new things, and it's all new. So I think by being humble and being willing to admit your mistakes and being willing to celebrate things and then apologize for things and stuff like that, there was a real comfort level that came with taking that approach that I think was really positive. David himself was just he said, I want to make sure we're not going out beating our chests, but that we're going out really on a journey of learning. If that's okay, Madison, I'm going to hit someone else, if that's okay by you.
Yeah, that's
sure.
good.
Thank you. Ellie, I'm going to bring you in. While we're waiting for Ellie to join in, Julie, I am coming to your question. It looks like we maybe lost Ellie. Julie is asking, what's the best way to communicate marketing messages to your customers who are eco first timers, who don't know about the B Corp but love it, folks who know it well and don't need education? This is a really interesting thing because there is a spectrum that we're running in terms of awareness with guests. Do you have any advice there, David?
I'm looking at this question. It is an interesting one. Well, let's start with Oh, I see. But those who don't know but would love it.
Yeah, you've got a bunch of people whose awareness levels for B Corp and awareness levels for even what you do as part of a B Corp are really limited. They just come to ski,
Right.
you know? And then there's a whole bunch of other people who are choosing you now because of the B Corp. And that might have been the competitive advantage in deciding to come to you versus someone else. So how do you manage the range of ways that you need to educate and talk to people?
Well, I think we're still learning about this, and Danielle and I have had this conversation. What is Ski the Change 2.0 or 3.0? How do you continue to build on this story? I don't have all the answers. I do think that dabbling with trying different things. We've put certain things out on social media that have hit. We have a food digester in our basement now, and it takes 400 something pounds of waste, food waste, and you throw it in there, and a couple days or a couple weeks later, we have 40 pounds of this beautiful soil amendment. Our facilities director, Mike Bauer, walks in and tells us about this. We all get excited, and our marketing team picks it up and sticks it on social media. That was a hit. We had huge response to it. It was amazing. It's like, well, if they like the food digester, let's try something else. We thought they liked hearing about 12 or 18 inches of powder. So I really think there's a lot of trial and error to this, and I think even in the hotel space, you put some things in the rooms that introduce the concept, and you watch the response. You're asking, how do you educate the eco first timers? I think you put some things in front and see how they respond, and then start to build on the story from there. So I will tell you, I think there are not many eco first timers in this era, and the awareness on social and environmental responsibility, I think, is at an all-time high, and I think it is more important than ever. So people have been exposed, certainly on the climate change front, and now on the social front in the last year. It's very apparent. I don't know, I wouldn't call it a movement. I guess I would call it an evolution, is alive and well. So I guess my real answer is there are fewer and fewer eco first timers. But for those that are out there, just start the conversation and see how it warms up. And then I would build the story from there.
I think some of the things that we have done is, and David's talked about this, is we've put the messaging out in layers. And there is signage on resort that explains some of the initiatives. There is things in room. There's educational content that everyone can appreciate. Like the first question you ask when you get into the room is, how do I get water? Is one of the things. The hotel has water bottle fillers in the hallway, but you have to tell someone that you have to go out in the hallway with your own water bottle and go down and get it. So by virtue of having to operationalize some of their changes, they have to educate. So that's sort of a base level for those people who are maybe first timers. To David's point, that's not it. But even as someone who understands eco-first initiatives, I still had to figure out how to get water into my hotel room. So that educational layer is there. But as we sort of work through to those folks who know it well but don't need the education, we'd call those people, sort of our core. We're marketing to our core, or our best guests who share our values. That's where the storytelling starts layering in. And we're then able to expand on those stories. We're able to sort of bring them to life. We're able to attach some emotional quality to them. So I think when you move from education through to inspiration, that's where you bring people along. And I think that's important in any business, not just a resort, but in any business. I think you have to have all layers of that all the time to meet all of the people and where they're at, in this sort of journey around environmental consciousness, but also in just learning and understanding how your product works and how they're going to align their values with it. Let's see if we want to maybe take a question about just the B Corp in general, because I'm conscious of the fact that we don't have much time. But we've had a bit of a few questions around wage parity and that sort of thing, which I think is really interesting to a lot of people. So David, do you want to just talk a little bit about that program and how it came to be and how you managed that, internally?
Yeah, that one also has been an evolution. And we started with breaking away from the minimum wage that was in our state. We realized we needed to pay people more, and we started putting our wage scale higher than the minimum wage. About 2 years ago, actually, we have a woman that works for us that is passionate about equity issues, and she would come storming into my office. We're not paying enough, and we're not giving enough, and the benefits are too narrow. And my response always was, great, bring some ideas. And she went out and dug in and specifically learned about the living wage and the MIT living wage standard. They put a living wage in place for every county in the United States, and they do it for a single family member a single individual or a family. And we felt that was a fair thing to do. So we introduced the living wage 2 years ago. And when we first put that in, it was $10. It became $11. It became $11.95. And now it's $15. It is going up to $15. And as an employer, it's like, as an employer in a labor-intensive business, it's like, what am I going to do moving from $11.95 to $15? It's absolutely the right thing to do. And we need to pay these entry-level folks a little bit higher. We need to get their footing on the ground. But that has also been an evolution. And we just need to look for more efficiencies elsewhere. We need to look at pricing. And actually, that's some of the pushback that we get. We're increasing our past pricing. And some people are putting, hey, that is not what B Corps do. You're not thinking about the locals. But we have introduced a living wage. We've introduced pay equity. I think on the pay equity front, you have to do this annually. It's amazing how quickly you get out of alignment. There's also a question, I believe, on tips. People working in restaurants, maybe people in valet that have big tips. We look at that as total compensation, and we think it's okay to pay below a living wage for those that are in a big tip pool. They're going to make many, many, many more times in tips than they are in an hourly wage. So we think it's okay to do that. It's interesting with this COVID pandemic, we've gone cashless, and now everybody is going onto Square and clicking in the tip. Tips are at an all-time high. I mean, people are paying 30, 40, 50% tips now because they're thinking about the workers. So we think it's okay that tipped staff have a different wage level than the living wage of a standard hourly worker.
All right, we maybe have time for one more question. And I think there are a few that are interested, David, in the process of getting going, the assessment phase. Some people have asked, how do you got ownership or upper management? David is upper management, so he's not having a problem getting that on board. But maybe you can just speak a little bit to that. I think we had it in our original presentation, but we had to edit a little bit out. So maybe you can just talk to that just really quickly. We only have a couple minutes.
Yeah, I think there's just a couple things on this one. First is taking the B Corp assessment. And there's a question earlier today, if I'm not a B Corp, but I have those values, is that good enough? And I think, yeah, it can be good enough. But take the assessment, and you'll go, we put 3 or 4 people in a room, myself included, for 4 hours. And we just went through question by question and to learn about our organization. And through that process, we picked up a lot of learnings. I mean, you'll learn things like volunteer pay. Can you have your staff work several hours or several days over the course of a year for a local nonprofit? You'll pick up a point by doing that. So take the assessment. That is step one. I think as far as selling the concept to upper management, I would just go out and look out at the successful organizations and purpose-driven organizations. I mean, I would pick up those big brands: Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, Seventh Generation, Danone. These are huge brands Dr. Bronner's, right, that are very, very successful with purpose. And I like what Danielle says about differentiation. And this is a great way to differentiate. I think that gap may narrow going forward as more organizations go this direction. But I would definitely point to those organizations that have been very, very successful with a purpose-driven game plan.
Mm-hmm. All right. Were we 9:20 or 12:20 or 12:25? I think we're perhaps past our time.
Yeah.
I want to just really thank everyone for joining in. There's, so many questions that David could have answered, and I encourage you just to, dig in. It's been an incredible journey walking this with you, David. It's really been inspiring. It's inspired Origin to look at our own opportunities through a B Corp. It's something that we see and we're able to, because we work with a lot of ski areas, we work with a lot of outdoor sport brands, we're really able to see how easy it is for a brand like Taos Ski Valley to really occupy a different place in the competitive landscape. And that's such a valuable thing these days when you have a go-to place right away. It makes the marketer's job a whole lot easier, and it makes the marketer's job in terms of selling some of those ideas up to senior management a whole lot easier, because marketing is often linked directly to results. So I echo David. Everyone should do your research and give it a go, and at least take a few steps in that direction. It's been an awesome ride. Thanks, David, for joining us. Thanks, everybody else, for joining us.
Thanks so much.